So I think we can begin. It's a great honor to be hosting this workshop. This is part of our campaign, Meet with European Quality. When looking at our agenda today, to use the time effectively, we allowed ourselves to divide Ms. Sophie's presentation into two parts. The first part will be devoted to the US market, and after Mr. Andrew Joseph's presentation, there will be additional information on the Canadian market. And this will allow us to divide all the information that we have into, let's say, thematically oriented chunks. And going into the meat of the meeting, please, Agnieszka Różańska, the General Director of UPEMI, who will start the next part. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of UPEMI, the Union of Employers and Employees of the Meat Industry, I would like to wholeheartedly welcome you to the meeting today, and I hope the other guests will also arrive during our meeting and will join the discussion. Today, we would like to enable you not only to listen to the presentations on the Canadian and the American markets, which are key markets for the Polish, we can even say strategic markets for the Polish industry, and they are also one of the possibilities for the increasing growth of the Polish exports. So we would like to strengthen and grow our knowledge on those markets and look at Mr. Jacek Kucharski, one of the Deputy CVO, the next guests also arriving. So I won't take too much time because we can use it more effectively. So please ask any questions that you may have. We are here for you. And we hope that our guests will be able to answer all your questions and sometimes surprise you with different information that can be useful for you in the future. Thank you very much for attending this workshop, and I hope that this will be a fruitful meeting. Thank you. So now the most important question, Mr. CVO, are you ready to take the stand? Oh yes, so now it's your part. So Mr. Jacek Kucharski, Deputy CVO, Chief Veterinary Officer, will take the mic. So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome. I was invited here by the illustrious UPEMI company to say a few words on our cooperation. Well, veterinary cooperation between the veterinary services and the trade services, and how it looks like when we think about cooperation between us and the northern part of America. I don't have my presentation with me. I have a pen drive with me, but we would have to stay here till the end of the week if I were to tell you all about the special requirements and the special regulations that US and Canada have that are really, really strict. And they are very wise, on the other hand, because they are based on the best scientific knowledge. So they are based on Codex Alimentarius. This is the highest level of food-related knowledge in the world. The committees of the Codex Alimentarius, I believe in Parma, in Italy, it is the highest level of food safety in the world. The European Union uses this knowledge, of course, and we create our own food stuff-related philosophy and food safety philosophy. And here we've got the European EFSA, which safeguards the European food. And we can say that EFSA, EFSA, is also the scientific body provides us with know-how, and an entire cooperation between Europe and third countries like Canada or the United States is looking for elements that can be balanced between the both parties, looking for solutions that can be profitable for the both sides. So I won't go into details when it comes to some problems and challenges. We have the CETA agreement, which impacted those transatlantic relationships. But, ladies and gentlemen, I will give you an example from my backyard, so to speak. The European Union does not allow meat that, after slaughter, well, the carcasses that were disinfected to decrease the amount, the number of microorganisms on the surface. The U.S. use such chemical agents, which is forbidden in the European Union, and this is one of the most important points of contention between the European Union and the U.S. But if we are looking for a balance, if we are looking for equivalence in a way, we as Poland have access to the American market when we think about pork. We've been exporting pork for many years to Canada and the United States. Well, the U.S. is in fact the third largest market for our pork. Last year we've exported over 2,500 containers of pork meat and pork products. This is the largest recipient outside the European Union and a very important strategic market for the Polish industry. We have the health certificate for pork meat and pork products. We send a lot of it. With Canada, it's similar. Here we have the health certificate for pork and the pork products. Additionally, we can send the fish products. This is mostly canned food. This is quite a large export, as well as egg products, or dried eggs or liquid eggs as a semi-finished product for the egg industry in Canada. So, ladies and gentlemen, the requirements are very important because they cover implementation and maintenance of a special HACCP system, so the hazard analysis and critical control points system. And we can say that this is an American system because it was invented and developed in the United States in the 60s in order to ensure safety and proper quality for the airspace industry and in order to ensure the safety of astronauts during their flights, because basically having stomach problems where in orbit is problematic. So a special system was developed. Well, you know it. Well, I don't have to go into details about the HACCP system, but this is the first time in the history when the control where foodstuffs are controlled at every stage of production, from farm to fork, which gives us a guarantee that the final product is safe. Until now, the nations were interested only in the final products. It was typical in Poland before we joined the European Union. We checked the final product. If it's okay, then it's good. If not, then we have a problem. Should we recall it? Should we destroy it? Utilize it? There was a great risk. And now, when working on basis of the HACCP system, there is no risk. There is no possibility for the final product to be inadequate or not matching the requirements. Apart, of course, we also need the good production practices and good hygienic practices. And here we can say a lot about cleaning, disinfection, decontamination. of services, of products even. Sometimes I told a certain challenge when we faced with the contaminated meat from the U.S. What is very wise in the Canadian and American system and the Israeli system as well, because Israel is also following the same system, the SSOP standards, the Standard Sanitation Operation Procedures, which is a very wise, pragmatic approach, which means that those surfaces are most important where there is direct contact between foodstuffs and the machine. So the contact points are the most important. They should be really sterile, free from pathogens, free from listeria, free from everything. So this is something that we are focusing on, and this is very special in those requirements. This is the key, the most important element. If somebody fails to understand that, then they will not be allowed to export to Canada and the US, because they fail to grasp the key element. Because what has any form of contact with foodstuffs in production, the hands of a worker, of an operator, the tools that the operator uses, all the surfaces, all the hooks, all the containers, all the transporters, all the conveyors. So all the surfaces that can be also above the production line. The Americans and the Canadians put great care to avoid water droplets, so condensation. And this is a key element of food safety. And this is a very wise approach, because the droplets can include dangerous pathogens, dangerous substances, dangerous microorganisms that can just get in contact with the foodstuffs and contaminate the whole container. So when we think about equivalency, these are some of the key elements and some of the most basic and core requirements for a given food plant. If there is any condensation, any water droplets, then this is unacceptable. If we have problem with the SSOP surfaces at the pre-operational stage, are not acceptable. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have 20 plants in Poland that export successfully pork, meat, and pork products to the US. It's 60,000 tons a year, or thousands tons, yes. To Canada is, I believe, about 30 different plants that can export, and the export is not as intensive, but it exists. And in the last few years, we've had quite a lot of challenges with the African swine fever that strongly impacted the pork industry. And well, sadly, this disease came from the east. Geographically, starting from 2007, ASF was first present in Georgia because one of the Georgian ports received animal waste that resulted in the first ASF cases. It was most probably Horeca waste from a cruise ship. Then from Belarus, from the Baltic state, this disease arrived in Poland. The first cases in Poland were discovered in wild boar, and we've been fighting this disease for 4 years now. We're quite effective because during all that time, by our immense work, we are able to keep the virus at bay in the eastern regions, in 4 or 5 eastern regions. But in Podlaskie region, the disease is dying out. More and more communes are declared free, as there were no outbreaks. We know that the African swine fever in Poland is reason for fear of our trade partners, because this is a real risk of transporting the virus to any place in the world. And as you know, the Chinese also have African swine fever for a few months now, over 40 outbreaks. The situation is unclear. At present, we have less and less information, but it's dramatic. Because if they have a herd, the largest herd, 700 million, this is the basic meat type for them. So this is a very difficult situation for the Chinese. We also have an American crisis not so long ago, that if the Chinese have the African swine fever and it spreads in Asia, then our American partners started to ask us very detailed questions about how we safeguard the food that is sent to the US, and how can we ensure that no ASF virus will be present in those shipments. Here we have the biosecurity rules and the regionalization rules. We are extremely efficient when it comes to separating the animals at risk into different zones, but we are able to separate safely different batches of products sent to the US and Canada. But this is a war, in fact. This is a situation that resolves a conflict where many people from the veterinary inspection and the other national services, including military, the police, the border guard, are fighting against the virus. And of course, from the very onset, we have assumed that we should not allow a single animal from those zones to the US. So all the animals that are used for creation of pork meat are sourced from the free zone. It's not the first zone, it's not the second zone, it's not the first zone, from the 709 regulation of the European Commission. And the US and the Canada knows that. They understand that. They've audited us, and the situation is completely clear and transparent. We don't hide anything from our partners because this is not in our interest. We are a testing ground. The whole world audits Poland now to have study tours, to see and to ask how are we able to keep the virus at bay for 4 years when we look at the number of outbreaks in Poland, but that how do we manage to keep it in check? So we are recognized and renowned in the whole world due to this, despite our problems with the low budgets, with the number of people that we have, and looking at the losses for the businesses that we create. We describe and we explain how we create maps, how we create zones. And when speaking to our colleagues from the USA, a key moment where the detailed electronic maps were sent that showed that every square meter of Poland can be analyzed when it comes to risk analysis, so that the division into zones is a reality and is based on risk analysis. The enclaves are also one of the problematic areas when we think. So we have certain plants that are located in the safe zone, but are surrounded by the limited zones. So we have such situation in Ełk, in Sokołów Podlaskim, in Łuków. And here we needed to explain to our partners on how enclaves work. And honestly, as there is a higher risk level there, we have proposed to the American side and the US side to resign from exporting foodstuffs from those safe zones, which are established in accordance with the European law, but they are fully recognized and allowed to export, but we proposed to stop exporting from those plants. So we stopped exporting fresh meat from the enclaves, both to the US and Canada. And now, at present, the only export that is allowed can originate from pigs that were raised and slaughtered and lived in the free zone, and only from the zones that are free of ASF. And another thing about export requirements, as I said, the food law of Canada and the US is the best in the world. The inspectors that audit us regularly, they are the professionals of the highest order. We have a great satisfaction even to work with those people because we learn a lot. We exchange know-how and experiences. This is a phenomenal thing. The Polish CVO, for 3 years now, is organizing trainings in Poland, but with support of HACCP Consulting Group from the US. This is a worldwide renowned American consulting company that presents the requirements and provides trainings to inspectors and auditors. Last year, thanks to UPEMI, we've managed to have such a training for the industry. And also, so after a week-long training for the inspection, we had a training for the industry, which helps us to understand and to increase our level of knowledge about the requirements from the Northern America. But those requirements are in fact a basis for the Chinese, Japanese, Israeli requirements. And as we are able to understand the system, we have implemented it fully, so we had no problems exporting kosher beef to Israel. And this is the same requirement, well, related to cattle, but still this can be easily translated to other species. And Canada has taught us an important thing, which is Canada is very strict on way in which products are canned. The Canadian knowledge on the quality of cans, of tins, on the way they should be closed or not, of the double bind. The cans are secured in the way that the side of the can is bended 2 times, and only the companies that are state-of-the-art can export to Canada. Canada is extremely efficient in finding all the problems with bad canning, and this is a right thing to do because this is public safety. A can has extremely long shelf life. If it's not closed properly, if it's not sterilized properly, then there is a lot of time for bad things to develop there. I don't want to frighten you, but this is a worldwide problem with the quality of canned food. And here we are very happy that the Canadian authorities allowed us to export. And there are 8 billion people on the planet now. 100 years ago, there was 1 billion in the year 1900. And we have symptoms of increasing lack of food in the world. They have 1 billion people who are starving. There is now a trend of not enough animal protein for the general world population. The fact is that globally there won't be enough animal protein. So every form of cooperation, every form of trade, every exchange of know-how is very valuable. And in the future, it will be an even more crucial business as the prices will go up, and they will go up. And later, many countries is increasing their growth rate and their consumption, meat consumption. And if we have more and more developing countries and more middle class and more people want to eat meat, so these areas like Africa or Asia will be the main destinations for the export of meat in the future. So if we think about those different new spaces for pork and beef and poultry, Poland is a big exporter of food. Now, today, it's about 30 billion euros when you think about export of Polish food. And mostly we supply other member states of the European Union, but we send more and more of our meat to far away markets, especially in poultry, as we are the largest poultry producer in Europe. And this year, the General Veterinary Inspectorate will check 1.5 billion heads of poultry. This is a phenomenal scope of inspection, and we send our poultry to all the corners of the globe. This is both poultry from our. This is both the traditional poultry, halal poultry, kosher poultry is being exported to all the possible countries. And 3 gates. If we think about Polish export, although there is about 100 countries to which we export our meat, but those 3 main gateways is first Hong Kong, a great buyer, a great trade partner, Saudi Arabia, the second tiger that controls the trade in the Arabian Gulf. And so it is also quite a large quantity of export. Belarus, which is our gateway to the east. Well, Belarus is a bit problematic because it's it's in the shadow of its bigger eastern neighbor. But if they need something, we provide. Then all the information that you need, you can find it in the CVO's website, which is quite active, that we recently changed to be more friendly to the user. You can find all the requirements of the third countries when it comes to export. There are all Canadian requirements, all the American requirements. They are the health certificate examples. So you can read it, you can check it, you can check which items are present for different types of shipments. So I think that really, on our side, we are committed to supporting Polish exporters, their questions, or also that we have online contact with US and Canada. We have special people, contact person that are for contacting the US and Canada. Not every day, perhaps, but we contact at least once a week. If there is some needs or some things that need to be clarified, there is no problem. So I invite you to cooperation. And the North America, they have everything. They have everything. They don't need to buy. But Polish meat in Canada and in the United States is considered very tasty and ecological, natural. This is something I've heard from the American consumers, that the Polish poultry and the Polish meat, that we are very close to exporting poultry. Similar to beef, I hope that we will manage to sign everything. If we have as good relations as now, then I believe that we will get it through to add beef and poultry. We have met all the requirements from the USA side, all the applications, a special electronic report, a self-reporting tool that included a few hundred questions, very detailed questions, that we needed to answer for our American counterparts. That would be a great fat book. And we send it on time. We wait for the answer from the American side. So I hope that we will increase our export further soon. So thank you very much. Let's have a good discussion. Let's have a good communication. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that presentation. The session of question and answers is planned after the presentations of our main foreign guests, but if you still have some questions now, it's time for you to ask them. No? No questions? That plants that are now surrounded, I mean Sokołów Podlaski, for instance, I understand that the conversations are ongoing. Is there a light in the tunnel that it might have a positive end? As for the moment, we've made some clarifications with the Americans when it comes to regionalization and rules of creating the areas, the enclaves, the zones, I mean. It was quite difficult, but I believe that we managed to clarify the doubts. And there's still the question of the enclaves I mentioned, and we have the information that it's still being analyzed. I mean, the rules are being analyzed, and we have a trilateral meeting in Brussels to talk about that. USA, the European Commission, and Poland. And the deputy CVO participated in that conference. So I hope that if there are no additional doubts, the Americans will agree to come back to full exports. However, we don't want to make pressure on them. We resigned from exporting fresh meat as a gesture of goodwill, but the prohibition itself, introduced quite rapidly, was a surprise for us, and we reacted strictly. I hope that everything will be made clear soon. As I told, in some areas the ASF is dying out, moving a little bit south. There are some clusters, but I won't be talking about that. The human factor at the moment can cause an outbreak of the illness anywhere. Look at Belgium, for instance, a great exporter of pork. I think it's a key export for them, and Belgium is practically blocked by dozens of countries in the world. And they didn't have any outbreaks. They just have 50 cases of ASF in wild boars. But as a consequence of that, Belgium cannot send their meat anywhere, China included, which causes very serious perturbations in Belgium. And in Poland as well, because Belgian meat appears on our market as the cheaper one. So as you can see, it's a global problem that affects the prices, the volatility of prices, and it's some things are unexpected. The prices in Europe are affected, first of all, by the situation in Germany, but as I told you before, the situation is very dynamic, and I hope that the partners will understand that we need to live with that. As long as we don't have any vaccination to ASF, we cannot do anything about that. So every country is in danger. The decision 709 by the European Commission has to be understood, and then the emotions will fade out. Do you have any additional questions? No? All right. So, Katarzyna Kwiecień, Director of the Department of Export Support from the National Support Center for Agriculture. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the General Director of the National Support Center for Agriculture, thank you for inviting me for that training. Our Support Center for Agriculture, when the CVO accomplishes its actions when it comes to opening a new market, then we come into play, because our institution is responsible for implementing the instruments of promotion policy according to the strategy of the Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development. a very strong brand of Polish food, both domestically and abroad. We promote that with a slogan, Poland tastes good. What's important, Polish high-quality food was also taken into account in the strategy for sustainable growth as one of the strategic sectors of the Polish economy. And it should be mentioned here that the participation of agri-food in Poland is growing. It used to be 13.4 in 2013 and 11% in 2017. The promotional activities of the Support Center for Agriculture could be divided into two pillars. There are promotional activities in the internal market and our actions on the external market. I myself am responsible for foreign markets. So let me tell you a bit more about that. Within the scope of these activities we undertake abroad, we support development of trade, we support Polish entrepreneurs, and also we supervise the activities carried out when it comes to promotion and information activities in selected markets that are financed from the European Union funds. Among our main promotional activities with the slogan Poland tastes good, we organize trade missions for Polish entrepreneurs abroad. We organize national stands at different fairs. We organize trainings and meetings for Polish entrepreneurs. We also organize missions with importers, distributors, representatives of store chains, and we also distribute information about the possibilities of entering different markets. As for the moment, we've been present in during 5 years, every year at the CL Canada fairs. Last year, 6 companies took part from the agri-food sector, which were mainly poultry, potato processing, cereals, bioproducts, fruit products, and other things. And during such an economical mission that took place in May 2018, the entrepreneurs took also part in B2B meetings, and also there was also a market seminar organized. Well, this market seems to be attractive for our companies, and the entrepreneurs intend to enter the market and get new business partners. What is more, within the scope of our promotional and information campaigns, we organized campaigns that taste Europe. It was organized in Canada and Japan in the years 2015-2018. I can also mention the meat with European quality on the US and Canadian markets. We also very intensively cooperate with foreign trade offices. We gather contacts and we gain information about the markets, and we also match companies with their potential contractors. In fact, that would be all when it comes to our promotional activities abroad. If you need some assistance, if you need some help to reach new potential contractors, or if you would like to know something more about analysis potential, we have our analysis office, and every month on our website we publish statistical data about the market, also about foreign markets. And it's a source from which you can know all the statistics about exports, quantities, countries. So I really encourage you to cooperate with us. Thanks very much. Do you have any questions? Well, then we can continue with our program. Now we're going to listen to the presentation about the rules of imports and exports. The U.S. market, as I mentioned before, we're going to concentrate on the U.S. market first. So Ms. Sophie Soudai, she's our expert for international trade from AGL, Alternative Global Logistics. Please take the floor.
Do you want to? No. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for attending this workshop and inviting us to come speak to you today. And thank you very much to the panel. I'm going to speak more on the ground level of what's actually happening, not at the government level, but at the actual business level, coming in and out, and the regulations that we see all the time. I understand that we have very strict protocols and procedures, but they're not as difficult as they appear on paper. As always, when you're reading something in a legal format, it seems much more daunting and much more difficult than it really is. But if you know the market, if you understand the government regulations and you're involved in it in a day-to-day aspect, then you understand how to navigate the maze of regulations. So I'm going to, I have some slides. They seem a little information heavy, but you can ask any questions that you want. And I'm just going to start. So, okay, there we go. Okay, so you know what your exports are, and these are the top 10 exports in out of Poland, and of course, meat is number 9. Okay, so the objectives of this are really to give you an overview. We could do a whole day workshop on the regulations and the new regulations, because even the United States companies are also having trouble navigating sometimes and understanding all of the FDA regulations. It's also very new because now we're in compliance. We're not in the trial periods anymore. We're in the compliance periods for food. So we're going to just go over what the rules and liabilities are for different people in different companies in the supply chain, and also what really it is. And the most important thing for Poland and for Polish companies is the Foreign Supplier Verification Program. That's really the most important aspect of it, because that's what really affects you and what allows you to be more marketable to U.S. companies. How doing business in the United States is different now because of the Foreign Supplier Verification Program. And in general is you can make the sale, you can go to all the trade shows, but can you deliver your product to your new customers? And how you can differentiate yourselves and your companies to other countries or other U.S. suppliers at the same time. Okay, so this is just a graph on how the U.S. importer looks at things. So the process manufacturer, grower, or exporter is a Polish company. Then you have the importer security filing, which is a part of the customs, which is 10 data points. And it was put into effect right after 9/11. In 2001 because of the security. So the ISF is really more about security than about food safety. The U.S. Customs want to know exactly who manufactured, exactly who is shipping, and exactly who is receiving. So if there's a traceability issue on security, and this ISF is really based on security, then they know exactly who to go back to. And what happens now is FDA has the ultimate authority over all of the food and security issues, all of the different agencies. So FDA and Customs, CBP we call it, Customs and Border Protection, they work very closely together. So then you have your export government regulations, which comply to ours, and there's an agreement between the two. And then, of course, then you do your shipping. So before it can leave, all of that has to be done. Then, of course, Customs says yes or no if it can load or it can, or if there's a question. And then at that time, there's in the customs system, there's a monitoring, and then they'll say if they decide that they want to do some kind of an examination or they want to do some sampling, then it goes into the importer, and the importer is required on the customs side to also give certain data elements. Then it's either let go out of the port or they do some more examinations, delivered to customer. Then the customer usually sells it to a distribution center or to a wholesaler or to a large chain like a Walmart or something like that. And then it goes out to the consumer. Okay, so FSMA, the Food Safety Modernization Act, it really applies if you're a producer, a manufacturer, a processing plant, Polish exporter or shipper, and a shipper for domestic U.S. transportation. It doesn't apply if you're a retailer in the United States. They have other restrictions and other procedures that they have to follow, or if you're a consultant, or if you're a non-food manufacturer. So this is just a basic overview of FSMA, which is very, it has 7 major rules. So FDA has been given authority over everyone. They're now in charge of also departments of health at the local levels. So anytime there's any kind of a recall or any issues with food, they step in and they have the final say. FDA has changed their concepts from being reactive to proactive. So basically now the whole process about food safety is preventative controls versus reacting to a situation. And that's a very important concept to understand in the US because that's totally different than it's been in the past. Excuse me. So the FDA mandate says that imported foods have to be at a certain level, okay? I'm not gonna read that because you all know. That doesn't always mean that the US has a higher level. Sometimes the European Union has a higher level. It just has to be translated into the FDA format, the FDA legalese. And I think that that's a misconception in the market, is that everyone has to start from a totally new concept. It isn't. It's just that it has to be translated into that format. So a lot of EU standards are higher than the US. It's just that the formats are different or the requirements are different, and they just have to be, as we say, tweaked just a little bit. The foreign suppliers have to have the plans, the HACCP, and now what the US has gone into is, it's called the HARCP, which is the hazard analysis, risk management, preventative controls. So basically, HACCP is a global standard, but that HACCP also has to be translated into preventative controls because, as I said, the focus is preventative controls. The other part of the change is that the safe transport rule of FSMA takes into effect the entire supply chain. And as was mentioned, it's not just about the processing plant or the requirements at the manufacturer, but now it includes the shipment. Say if it's put into a truck and then it's loaded into at a warehouse and then into a container, all of that has to be documented now at the same time. And on the US side as well, so if the container is unloaded at a warehouse and then the food is transported to a distribution center or retailer, those trucks and those rail cars and those airplanes have to also have the record keeping for the safe transport, because they have to be able to show that there was no cross-contamination. So there wasn't dairy in a meat container. So the FDA is very concerned about cross-contamination and cross allergens and mislabeling, okay? So why is the FDA so concerned about FSVP, the foreign supplier? Well, 15% of the food supply is imported into the United States. There are a lot more recalls and there are a lot more outbreaks because of the data that's being collected and because of the scientific analysis that's being done by FDA. So they're able to see more in depth when it comes to a recall. And before, when, you know, years ago someone would get sick, they'd report it, but they didn't have scientific data where they could test. Well, now they're at the genome testing, so they're sequencing, and the FDA is creating a database so they can go back. And the interviews that they do with the people who get sick, they can actually pinpoint, like they did with the lettuce outbreak, exactly a region, a zone, and actually a farm. So traceability is a very big part of the FDA mandate at this point. Right now, importers are responsible for any food that they bring into the United States. So the ultimate responsibility and the legal responsibility is on the importer. So the importer is going to be very reluctant or very knowledgeable or very open to a company that is in compliance. And that's part of the big change now, is that the importer is more responsible. So they're taking more time in who they're dealing with. Some importers, like some exporters, are saying, it might be easier to work with a US company. That's where you can differentiate yourselves by doing some of the due diligence and preparing some of the documentation. So you can go to the importer and say, I'm already compliant. I know what the regulations are. Here's everything that you need. I have more information than maybe a US supplier, so try us. And the other part of that is that if the importers are found to be importing food that is not, and there's an issue, the foreign supplier can be put on an import ban, which doesn't really affect them because they'll just not, I mean, it does affect them, right? But they won't import into the US. But the US importer could be put on a ban as well and not be able to import anything else at all. So basically your product, if it's on a private label or it's an ingredient that is coming into another product, it becomes their brand. So they have to be concerned about their brand. Like I'm sure you heard about Chipotle. It's 4 years now and they still haven't recovered completely. So the supply chain and the ingredients and the processing, that has more effect on the importer and also on the consumer market than it used to have before. So the other part of FSVP is visibility and traceability. It's very, very important to FDA that they can trace back, and as was said, they want to trace back to the farm, to the region, to the center. On produce, which is not part of what this is, they want to go back to the field and the person who picked it. So the traceability aspect of FSMA is very critical because they want everyone in the supply chain to be accountable now for your section. So the rule of thumb is 1 step forward, 1 step back. You're only responsible for your section. So you want to know where you got it from and you want to know where it's going to, because they're the ones that are going to come back. And with the US government, which I'm sure is the same with most governments, if it's not in writing, it doesn't exist. Record keeping now is I would say mostly the critical aspect of any food safety plan is making sure that it's in writing, making sure that you can document it, and making sure that you can back it up. FDA, when they come in for an audit, they say, we need the documentation in a reasonable time. Well, what does a reasonable time mean? Reasonable time for us could mean 2 weeks, but reasonable time for them could be 48 hours. How are you going to get all that documentation together in 48 hours if you haven't been keeping good records? The best thing you want to do with any government agency is you want to be able to give it to them right away so that they leave. You don't want them to stay. You want them to leave, which of course we all want, right? Having good documents allows you to do that. And one of the things that we stress that a lot of companies don't stress is take the time to get it in English. Because in the United States, when they have companies that are Latin, usually there are a lot of inspectors that can speak Spanish, so it's not that difficult to get a translation. But if you're dealing with, say, Polish, there are not that many inspectors who can read it. So being able to say, here's our documentation and it's all in English, gives you a competitive edge as well, because the importer's gonna say, oh, you've taken all this time, so your food safety must be really up to par because you want us to see all of your processes. I'm gonna just briefly go over this. We're now in compliance, so all of the final rules have come into effect, and everyone, even to the very, very small businesses, has to be compliant. With meat, there are more than one government agency that's in charge of meat. So we know that FDA is in charge of everyone and they have the final say. But USDA APHIS is in charge of, they're in charge of meat, poultry, and eggs. And Food Safety Institute for, Food Safety and Inspection Services, excuse me, they regulate the human consumption. So you have more than one agency that's checking and more than one agency that has certain specific requirements, but they all come into the same thing. Their FDA has put out a lot of guidance documents. So there are a lot of things that you can find on the web, on the FDA website, on the FSIS website and USDA APHIS. Sometimes it's a little difficult to understand, but it's not impossible to meet all the requirements. What happens, as was said, they'll go to a facility and they'll come in, and we've had several of our clients already have visits from FDA, where they'll come in and they'll ask for the documentation, and then they'll go to the foreign supplier, and then they'll do an on-site audit as well. The one thing that I would stress, if you get a phone call from any government agency that they want to come and inspect your facility, say yes. Because anybody who says no, they just get put on the list, and nobody tells you that you're on a list, and nobody says you can't import, but it happens. And then when the shipment gets there, it's refused. So you want to always be open to the government, but you also want to stay with them, and you want to accompany them wherever they go and have somebody, especially your food safety person, be with them to answer any questions that they might have, so you can clear up any misconceptions if they arise immediately. Okay? This is just also the preventative controls. This is another part of the law, which is the foreign suppliers have preventive controls already, but the U.S. companies have to also have these preventative controls, and they have to have someone who's trained as a qualified individual. So as a food safety person in any organization, they have to have certain training and gone through certain courses and certain certifications, which is the same as the EU, and so you have it on both sides. So you have your food safety people talking to each other instead of your management, who might not know all of the, individual day-to-day issues that are happening. Oh, I went the wrong way, sorry. Okay, no? Sorry. Okay. The other part of it is about the recalls. As I said, that your product, or if you sell private label, that becomes the U.S. company's brand. So everyone is very careful about what happens to their name, to their reputation. So there are different kinds of recalls. Mislabeling is the most common. Then you have the illness breakouts, Then you have the contamination, which is also one of the most common as far as machinery is concerned. Then what happens is if somebody gets sick or there's a few people that get sick, they'll be reported to the CDC, which is the Center for Disease Control. They're the ones that usually work with the local departments of health. And then they start to get everyone else in place. So they're kind of like the first responders, and they make sure that everybody else is working so that the recalls can happen if they need to, or that they understand where the outbreak started and they can contain it as quickly as possible. But as I said, FDA has complete control over the authority over everything. So there are two kinds of recalls. There's a mandatory recall, and then there's a recall where FDA will say, we have an issue, and do you want to take your product off the shelf? And so then the companies can actually take care of that. Or if they don't agree with FDA, then FDA will make sure that it's a mandatory recall, and they call all the retailers, and they will tell them, you have to take this off the shelf, but then they charge it back. If that happens, then the company that has a recall is not really in good standing with FDA, and those are the things that you don't want to happen. So what we say is, does traceability offer hope to food safety? To the individual firm, it does, because it can differentiate your product from someone else's product, because you can actually give that information, right? To the industry, it also helps elevate the industries, because like in the United States with the leafy greens, there's a real issue. So as an industry working together, you can create more food safety and also more procedures that help the entire industry, which helps individual firms. And then to the consumer, it's really important. So I want to interject one thing here as far as consumers are concerned. In the United States, the millennials have taken over in the United States as far as buying power and marketing. Millennials love stories, and we were sharing some of this yesterday. I'll give you an example in an industry that's not yours, the cut flour industry, which is usually Ecuador, Colombia, South American countries. They realized that they were losing market share and that the millennials were not buying a lot of cut flours because they felt there was no real value to it. You buy it, it dies. They started a marketing program based on the story of the woman in the field, this Colombian woman who's picking flowers, but because she has a job, she can send her kids to school, and so she raises the level of the standard of living by allowing her children to get an education. So then the millennials started to see that there was a social value attached to what they were buying, and they started to buy flowers, so they really increased the sales. So what we say is, give the story to your product. If you're a third generation family who's still producing, give that story. That story is going to give social value, and it's going to give you an advantage over somebody like a big company who's just mass producing. It gives that individual feeling to your product, like, I want to buy it because I'm helping something grow. It's more of a social value. So that's very important to think about when you're doing your marketing. So here we're talking about the different parts of the food safety plans where everyone has to be verified. So you're verifying the producers, you're verifying the raw materials, you're verifying your ingredients, you're verifying all the different aspects. So it's not just your producer and your manufacturer, but it's also where are you getting your materials from? Are they practicing food safety? Can you verify, especially with a spice, right? Can you verify that they don't have salmonella, that their factory has no history of outbreaks? It's all about history as well, because when a company is looked at by FDA, they're going to look at, well, have they had other instances of issues? Are they safe? I mean, is this the first time? FDA is very open to working with companies and countries as long as everyone's doing their due diligence. Due diligence is really important. Do your homework, understand your market, understand what's required, understand how to get it through. That's key. Okay, So with the Foreign Supplier Verification Program, each facility has to be registered with FDA. There are just steps. It's not that it can't be done. It just takes a little time and it takes a little information and consistency. So what's key to understand is that every foreign facility that grows, manufactures, processes, packs, or even holds a product that's being imported into the United States. So sometimes even the warehouse that's just consolidating all of the cargo and packing it into a container, but it's food, they also have to be registered. And that's the same on the other side as well. And that's one of the key factors for the US companies that's very different, because in the past, when just holding the product, you were not part of the supply chain, but now you are. Science and testing is important because what happens is it gives you a range. If you have science and testing and you can say from this date to this date, we had a batch, nothing before that will be affected by a recall. And that's very important for the US companies as well. So they do a lot of intermittent testing so that they can say this batch and nothing before it. Because if you say when you're manufacturing and you do your testing every 24 hours, anything before that is not going to be part of that batch. Anything after it also won't be part. It's from test to test. So that's really important to keep in mind, because you want to have from one kill step to another kill step. So you know that this is just one batch and this is one batch. The other part is the ongoing verification. So a lot of times you want to have second-party auditors come in, do mock audits, mock recalls, before you get the third-party auditor like the BRC or any of the other global auditing parties. So you can make sure that your grades are very high. It's very important to be competitive in the United States to have those very good audit reports. Okay, so in detail, importers as well need to conduct these following activities. So the importers have to verify your companies. They have to verify that you have all of the food safety, that you're doing the hazard analysis. But most importantly, it defines who controls the hazard. So if I'm getting a product from you, but I have another process where I'm doing a kill step, where I'm manufacturing it, then I don't have to worry so much about you. I just have to be able to trace it and trace what you have, because I'm taking care of it. So say it's a ready-to-eat meal and I'm cooking it, so I've brought it to a certain degree, so I know that I've killed all of the possible pathogens, then I don't have to worry so much about the other. I just have to be able to document it. Supplier verification activities are extremely important at this point, and corrective actions. So if we have an audit, or if even your food safety person sees something, you can also document, you must document those corrective actions, because that's just as important as the food safety plan itself. And the periodic assessment of the foreign supplier. So the US importers are supposed to do it at least once a year. That's the mandate from FDA. But a lot of times they don't have the budgets, as some of the smaller exporters don't have budgets, so they can use second-party consultants to come and do the assessment for them. Okay, so as I said, the safe transport part is very critical at this point, because everything has to be documented. So the trucking companies and the railroads and all of the transport conveyances in the United States now have record keeping as well. So a lot of new companies have come out with software and programs that assist. So you can have a barcode, you can do pictures. So a lot of the trucking companies now are giving their drivers iPads, so they can be immediate. There are some temperature recorders that also can be downloaded immediately, so you have immediate records. The most important thing in the transport is making sure that there's no cross-contamination. One thing that I didn't mention is that this food safety plan, according to the Foreign Supplier Verification Program, is each product. So it's not your whole facility. So each importer has to make sure that they have a food safety plan based on each product. So if you have 5 products, you just have to have where that difference in the process is. So say 5 steps are the same and then 6, 7, and 8 are different. Those are the only things that you have, but you have to have them separate so that you can supply those to your importer so they know, okay, this product has this and this product has that. And sometimes that seems daunting, but it's only what's different. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. You just start where it's different. In July of 2019, the last rule is going to come into effect, which is the food defense. And there's a little bit of a difference, but you already have most of that when you do the global HACCP. It's about the bioterrorism and the adulteration. So it's based on security. The other part that isn't, that will be coming in 2019 is also for produce, but that doesn't affect you. So like I said, your product becomes part of the company's brand. So if anything happens to their brand, it's their name in the marketplace, and they can lose a lot of money and a lot of lawsuits. Like we said, Chipotle was one of them. So what do you expect now in the U.S. market? Well, like I said, you can close the deal, but you have to make sure you can deliver it. New exporting companies, it's finding the right support system and the right partners to work with. Some of the U.S. companies are not that knowledgeable on the laws as well. The more knowledgeable you are, the more they're going to want to work with you because maybe they don't have to worry so much that they have to keep all of those records. They can just incorporate your records into their food safety plan. How do you want to elevate your company? How do you want to differentiate yourself? And we've heard this time and time again from suppliers, from importers in the United States, from companies. Well, maybe I want to work with a U.S. company now because they're here and they're domestic and they're under the same rules that I am. But as we said, if you can supply that documentation, that information to them, you differentiate yourself and you say, I'm a safe supplier. I'm a compliant supplier, not a challenging supplier, which is very important because that allows you into markets that maybe you weren't allowed, maybe you wouldn't have been able to get into years ago, but because of the terrain being different, so it gives you that opportunity. I want to also mention cultural differences. So labels are very important, and labels are also one of those areas that is like a little daunting because FDA has a guidance document, which is 132 pages, but it's in legalese and it's in a language that some of us, even who speak English, don't really understand. An example is we had a cosmetic company that was working to bring their product into the United States, and they had an ingredient of yogurt. So on the label, they spelled yogurt, Y-O-G-H-U-R-T, which is misspelling for the U.S. consumer. So when they see something that doesn't look right, they question the entire process. They question the entire product. They don't just question the label. So language and cultural differences are very important to understand when you're getting into a new market. Language is, maybe you think the word means something, maybe I think the word means something, but the best is to work with somebody who understands your market and your culture and the American culture, which is very important. Let me see. Right? So I think I've finished my presentation, and if anyone has any questions, I'll be available.
Dobrze, w takim razie thank you very much for the first part of this presentation. Jeżeli nikt z Państwa nie ma pytań,
if there are no questions, we continue about the American market. And Mr. Sam Gazdziak from Independent Processor, the editor-in-chief, will present us the consumer trends when it comes to direct approach of the client to what's happening in the American market. And he also tells us about some promotional possibilities in the US. And what's interesting, we'll become familiar with a case study about Ireland and the US market. So Sam, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you for having me here. It's been a real honor to come to Poland. As you can tell by my last name, I've got family from here. It's been a couple of generations since we were here. But, okay. Great. Yeah, I'm not nearly as tall as you are, so. All right, so it's been a couple of generations since my family has been here, but so it's been a pleasure to come to Poland and see a bit of the homeland. So I have been writing about the meat industry for about 14 years now, and what's really interesting to me is how things have changed since the time I started writing up until now. When I started writing about the industry about 2004, 2005, the CEOs in the meat industry knew that people in the United States, consumers knew nothing about the agricultural market. They were so far divorced from that area where everybody grew up near the farms that they didn't understand how meat was made. All they knew and all they cared about was whether or not the food was safe, whether it was wholesome, and whether it was affordable. So let's fast forward to what people want in 2018. Are we getting it? Did I break it already? There we go. All right, so in 2018, consumers want their food to be nutritious and safe and affordable and antibiotic-free and hormone-free and humanely raised and humanely harvested and clean label and locally made and all natural and organic and sustainable. They want to make sure that the animal lived a happy life. They want to know that it was slaughtered under the best of circumstances. They want to know the name of the farm where it was raised and the location where it was raised. And thanks to some of the technology now, you can actually do that to some extent. So the internet is to blame or to credit for a lot of these innovations, especially the rise of social media. People have more access to information than they've ever had before, and so they want to know more about their meat. Unfortunately, the internet is sometimes wrong. This is a big shock to some people, but so sometimes they get misinformation about the meat industry, and that has effects for the industry as a whole too. The net result of all of this information that people have is that people are now distrustful about what companies tell them, particularly large corporations. Big corporations are evil, small corporations, the mom and pop companies, those are the good guys, is how it generally works out in the United States now. So people don't really believe what they read too much. But they do want to feel good about what they buy. They want to buy food that is not only good for the family, but it makes them feel good when they buy it. It makes it feel like they're doing something good, and they get a better story with it. So, and it is worth pointing out that conventional products, your ground beef that's in a foam tray and covered in a plastic wrap, or the pork chops or chicken breasts, those are still the most popular products out there. But the areas of the meat industry that are showing the most growth are the ones that have attributes that people are favorable for. It could be natural, it could be organic, and we're going to get into a bit of that there. But this is a market where companies, even a small company, can create a disruption and establish a presence in the industry by giving the consumer what they want. So most PowerPoint demonstrations that I've been to have at least one incomprehensible slide filled with a chart with a lot of numbers. So here's mine. What you need to know about this, and this is a lot of information, is that people believe that plant-based foods are a growing trend in the US, and they are. People are eating more plant-based meals than they have before. Some of the companies that are in that sector are getting very cocky and swearing that they're going to wipe the meat processing industry out by the year 2035. What this shows is that for the first 9 months of the year, from 2018 to 2017, we're producing more meat in the United States than we ever have before, across every single sector. The only thing that has gone down is turkey production in the United States, and I think a big part of that was one of the hurricanes that came through did a lot of damage in the turkey industry sector, the Carolinas. But basically what this is meant to show you is that if people think that Americans are going to stop eating meat, it hasn't happened yet. So what they do want are different attributes, and this is I kind of lumped it all into better for you attributes. They want meat that is they want products that are protein rich. Everybody has started to realize that protein, one of the important building blocks of their body, is something that they need more of. One thing, unfortunately, is that most Americans don't know that meat is a good source of protein. That's just how far we are removed from agriculture. So a lot of companies are putting the number of grams of protein in big bold letters on their packaging so that consumers can easily see it. A lot of other areas, anything from yogurt to peanut butter to peanuts, are picking up on the protein trend, but this is meat's sweet spot. This is its home base. It should be able to be the top provider of protein than any other product out there. They want meat that is antibiotic-free and hormone-free. These are things that they don't want. They don't want antibiotics or hormones in their products. There's some misinformation as to how much antibiotics and hormones are actually in meat, but people believe what they're told, and so a lot of companies are now putting this on their packaging to make people understand that this is the product that they're looking for. They want things that are all natural or organic. All natural is a bit of a confusing term in the fact that there is no actual definition of natural. So natural could mean whatever you, the processor, want it to mean. Most companies say that it's minimally processed. Also, that could mean whatever you want it to mean. Basically, the connotation of all natural is that this is meat in its purer form. Is less processed form. But because there is no definition of natural, there's a little bit of distrust with it. So you have to have reasons for it to kind of back up what you say. Organic is a little bit different in that there actually is a USDA definition of it, and there's certification that you have before you're able to put organic on your product. And it's very comprehensive and very complex, and it even goes down into where the animal was raised, the feed that it was given, the pesticides that were or were not used on the fields where the animal was raised. So if you're going to have an organic product, you've got to take it as far back to the food chain as you possibly can. Clean label is something that is really taking off. Nitrates and nitrites have been demonized in the consumer press as the cause of all sorts of ills, especially with heart and blood pressure problems. There have been some reports that tried to say that it's a cancerous substance. Now, you would have to eat an almost impossible amount of hot dogs or cured meats in order to eat enough nitrates and nitrites that would cause damage to you. But people are still mistrustful of this, and so they want that out of their products as best they can. And then that we get a little bit into the actual life of the animals themselves. But people are looking for free-range, cage-free, grass-fed. They want to know a little bit about the living conditions that the animals were in. Free-range is something that you'd see primarily for chickens, or cage-free as well. Grass-fed for any kind of ruminant animals is considered the pinnacle of products. And as I said before, there's still plenty of room for conventional products, but the areas that have these attributes are the areas that have been showing the most growth. So these are some of the examples of products that fit into this better for you category. This is from White Oak Pastures. This is a regional project in the southeastern United States. But in the space of one small label on a 1-pound package of ground beef, these are all the attributes that they're able to include with it. No added hormones, free roaming, grass-fed, pastured, humane, regenerative, raised without antibiotics. This is great. Hand butchered on our sustainable multi-generational family farm. That's a lot of information. You might not even know what all of that means. Most consumers probably don't know what regenerative means, but they know that it makes them feel good if they buy a product that has that. So this is, and this started off as a very small operation, just selling product in South Georgia. They're now all up and down the East Coast. So hot dogs. Hot dogs, the typical American junk food staple, is becoming healthy. And this is Oscar Mayer, one of the top companies for hot dogs in the country. But again, in the space of one label, natural. Angus beef, which is a premiumization of the product. It's not just beef, it's Angus beef. No nitrates or nitrites added. And they have a little note at the bottom of that tells you that it's only from things that occur naturally in celery salt. That's what most companies are using as a substitute for nitrates or nitrites now. But no artificial ingredients, no fillers or byproducts, and gluten-free. So these are not the hot dogs that you grew up with. These are high-end hot dogs. Chicken fingers, another children's staple favorite. Something else that has never been considered as health food until now. These are organic chicken fingers, and you can see the USDA certification for that. This is free-range chickens, no antibiotics. Again, going into how the animals lived, an all-vegetarian diet. No added hormones, no GMOs, no preservatives, no fillers. This would be minimally processed, basically. Even frozen meals, something that has never been considered health food in the United States at all, they have no added antibiotics in this chicken product. And they've also got 10 grams of protein. They've made sure to notice that. And 0 grams of trans fat. So these are just some of the things that are part of the better for you category. So one of the other big trends we have is convenience. Americans are more rushed than they've ever been before. Sometimes they're so rushed, they don't have time for 3 square meals a day. What they're doing now is we're kind of grazing throughout the day and eating 4 or 5 meals, smaller meals, snacking throughout the day. But people who do that, they do want at least some healthy snacks. So meat snacks has become one of the fastest growing areas of the meat industry. There are new meat snack companies popping up every year. And it goes into a couple of different categories. Beef jerky is the traditional American product. It's been around forever, but the beef jerky today is not the same as it was 20 years ago. Beef jerky 20 years ago it had the consistency of shoe leather, and it didn't really have any kind of flavors. It was peppery or really peppery. Those were basically your 2 options, and you had to gnaw on it in order to eat any of it. Now, it is gourmet jerky. Comes in any variety of flavors that you want. It comes in different tenderness qualities that you want. And so it's, I've got some examples to show you later, but it's not your father's beef jerky. Meat sticks is also something that's taking off. Meat bars, which is kind of a meat version of a granola bar or a protein bar, those are really exploding in popularity too. Meat snack sticks primarily was the domain of a product called Slim Jims for a long time. I don't know if that's in Poland or not, but if you looked at the ingredients list of a Slim Jim, 1 or 2 ingredients down, you see something called mechanically separated chicken. And people really didn't know what that meant, but it doesn't exactly give connotations of an all-natural product. So even snack sticks now, there are plenty of companies out there on the market now that are trying to make a better-for-you snack stick. And the meat bars are the same way. A lot of the protein bars that you see are made from highly concentrated egg protein and whey protein. Meat bars are now meat with some ingredients in there. Some are mixed with fruit, some are mixed with grains, but it's a new type of bar. And the audience for this tends to skew a little bit younger. So it's for consumers in their teens up to about their 40s or so. And it's very popular among people who are into fitness and CrossFit. These are handheld items that you can eat on the go. You can just grab it out of your backpack if you're going on a hike or a run. And it is a quick way to get your protein fix. There have been other handheld meat options as well. I've got some pictures of some of that, but just any way that you could combine meat into a small package now is a way that they're doing it. It could be beef bites or chicken bites, which are little bits of sausage or meat put together. Any way that you can manufacture that, people are doing it. And then meal kits, a way where you can just pick up one box on the way home from work, and it has all the ingredients that you need to make a meal. So you can still get a cooked from scratch meal, but just you don't have to go throughout the entire grocery store to try and find all the ingredients. It's in one place for you. So here's some examples of some convenience products that are doing well in the marketplace. This is Country Archer turkey jerky and Sriracha beef jerky. So as you can see, these packages, handheld, easily portable. They do cover the better for you attributes that I previously mentioned. They've got some very creative flavors, so it's not just beef or peppered beef anymore. You've got honey chipotle turkey jerky. You've got the Sriracha beef jerky, and Sriracha was a huge phenomenon in the U.S. about 3 years ago, and is still pretty popular now. And this product in particular has a very tender bite, so you're not having to gnaw on this product with two hands just in order to get a piece of it off. It comes off, and it's more tailor-made for a mass audience. These are some of the handheld other products that I was mentioning. So you see the turkey stick here is an example of a meat stick, and it's got a bit more natural look to it than the typical mass-produced meat sticks there. And the pork bar is the meat version of a granola bar now. So it's there are only a couple of companies in the country that make this. It's a little bit trickier to make, but it's something that's a good protein fix again. And again, you've got creative flavors here. So the pork bar here is a sweet barbecue. The turkey here was a rosemary turkey. So it's very gourmet flavors for what was typically just a quick snack of convenience. So this is some of the other handheld products that are out there. This is from Hormel Foods, which is one of the biggest companies in the country. These natural choice wraps are basically a slice of deli meat and a slice of cheese wrapped in a tortilla. And it's just something that you can pick up for a very quick fix on the way. And they've got some of the better for you attributes obviously mentioned too, and it mentions the protein amount as well. And these are the meal kits that are available. This one, oddly enough, is from a restaurant, Chick-fil-A. I don't know if that's made it over to Europe yet, but it's a chicken quick service restaurant. But they're now offering high-end meal kits that you can pick up from the restaurant, take back home, and cook. And everything you need, this is for chicken parmesan, but they also have chicken enchiladas and a couple other variations too. But everything you need is in that box. And you can come home, take it, and make a quick meal for two that tastes like it was homemade. So this other section of the trends is a little bit more nebulous because it's basically people want more. They want to know more about the product. And as I said, you can find plenty of conventional products that don't have much of a story to them, and they're cheap and they're affordable, and you can get those. But for the consumers who want more than the usual, these are the things that they want. They want to get to know their companies. They want to get to know the story behind these meat processors. They don't want just a brand name. They want to find out the family about it. They want to find out how old it is. They want to find out where they're located. They want to know why they do what they do. They want more innovative flavors, maybe things that they can't get just by making a meal from scratch. Companies now have to be at the forefront of taste trends, and especially go throughout the country, find flavors throughout the world actually, find flavors that are popular from Latin America, from Asia, from Europe, bring them to the United States in a quick, easy meal that they can get. More environmentally friendly packaging. We are still very much a country that has foam trays and overwrap products. There are other alternatives. I see them every time I go to a trade show, and it's starting to creep more and more into the meat cases. And I think not only are they more attractive packaging, but there's less waste at the end of it. And so companies that can come up with an environmentally friendly packaging, I think would do very well in the United States. Overall, what this all converts to is a feel-good effect. Again, if people are going to be buying food that they bring home to feed their family, they want to feel good about it. And so products that have some of these attributes will help people feel better about purchasing their meat. So, as you can see here, on the top of the picture here is the conventional packaged meat. At the bottom is the slightly higher-end version, which is a bit more closer to a skin pack type of packaging. But that's the deluxe packaging. As you can see, I personally prefer the look of the bottom packaging. I think most consumers do too. And there's a lot less packaging waste at the end of the day there as well. And so I think things like that are gaining in popularity, and hopefully I would love to see these foam trays taken out in my lifetime, and I think with the innovations in packaging, we're probably going to get there. So this is a new company on the marketplace, but it does an awful lot. It's got a very creative flavor. You can see this is a turkey patty that is queso fresco and jalapeno. It has all the healthful attributes that I mentioned earlier. The 1-for-1 box you see at the top left of the package, what that means is that for every package that you buy, the consumer, the company donates a meal at a given food bank. And also the packaging here is very unusual. This package actually flips open like a book. And the story of Mighty Spark then is told on the inside. So in a very convenient package, in a very tight space, you can get a whole lot of information about this company. And the more information that people have about the company, the more comfortable they are buying their product and becoming a fan and a follower of that company. Here's another one too, and I should point out, in case there's any confusion, it's kielbasa, Polish sausage. I know that is not a kielbasa. That's actually the name of the family that owns the company. But it is a slow-crafted Polish sausage. Again, slow-crafted doesn't have an actual definition, but it really sounds good. It really sounds like a homemade production line. You've got the complete story of the company on the back of the label, and you've got this vintage picture of the company's founder on the back as well. And if you have any questions about the company, you call Michael Kielbasa, and that is his actual phone number on the back of the package. So you can call the company's president and talk to him if you want, or at least leave a voicemail message. But this is a mass-produced company. They're based out of San Antonio, Texas. They ship all across the country, but it looks, for all the world, like something that you would pick up at your local meat market. And that is something that people really, really like, especially in the areas where they don't have local meat markets. So how does all this play into a practical effect? Let's talk about the Irish Food Board a little bit, because they are in somewhat of a similar position maybe than what Poland is in. They began exporting beef to the United States in 2014, and this was after a long ban because of mad cow disease. So starting in 2014, they started from scratch. No tons shipped to the United States. Now they've got to have about 2,000 tons of product shipped to the United States as of last year. There are 6 processors licensed to ship to the country. So how did they get that foothold into the United States? Well, they introduced the retail operations at a show called the Annual Meat Conference in 2017. But before they got to that part, they had done their homework. They took a look at what consumer trends were and tried to figure out how what Ireland is doing matches what consumers want. And what they found out is that consumers like grass-fed beef. Ireland is almost all grass-fed beef. So by doing absolutely nothing different, they've had themselves an attribute that is very desirable to the U.S. consumers. And actually, what more, because of the environment that Ireland is in, they're able to keep their cattle on grass longer than they can in the United States. So their grass-fed beef was actually a little bit different than American grass-fed beef, which created that extra point of differentiation. Irish beef is raised overwhelmingly on family farms, and those family farms are audited to ensure that they're maintaining sustainability standards. So Ireland had a whole bunch of buzzwords that are very attractive to the American consumer: grass-fed, sustainable, family farms. And look at that picture. Beautiful green grass, beautiful blue sky. These are lucky cows. If you were a cow, this is the kind of cow that you would want to be, and that makes people feel good about buying that. They made Irish beef a premium item. It wasn't just beef from Ireland, it was Irish beef. And I hope that you understand the differentiation between those two phrases. It's not just lamb from Australia, which is lamb from a very far away. This is Australian lamb, a very premium quality. So Irish beef became a premium item just by producing the same way that they've been producing for centuries now, but they just happen to be doing it in a way that really appeals to the American consumer. So if I can have any bullet points to leave you with, it would be these. And I'm sorry I don't have a slide that talks about this, but margins are very tight in the U.S. food industry. If an importer or a wholesaler wants to bring your product to the market in any form, they must feel that you're not another Me Too product, because you can find Me Too products in the United States without too much effort. They must think that you're doing something special. So don't just look for them to buy your products and look for a way to sell them into the United States. Try and show them the reasons why your meat will succeed and solve their problems. So be more than just a producer, be a problem solver. Look at your product's characteristics and see how they match what the consumer preferences are. What may be just another detail for you could be an important selling point in the United States. Consumers will pay a premium price for an item that they consider premium, like the ground beef that I showed you earlier on. That sells for about $3 or $4 more than your average pound of ground beef. But people buy it anyway because it makes them feel good. They think it's more special than the products that they can buy that are just conventional products. Consumers are looking for meat with an old world quality, as I think that kielbasa picture that I showed you. Poland naturally is part of the old world, at least as far as the United States goes. So you have the opportunity to make your meat products premium meat products. And then finally, don't assume that the United States is one big culture, because it is not. The consumer interest in antibiotic-free meat in the West Coast would be very different from that of the Midwest. The way that consumers prepare pork in Texas is very different than what they do in New York. And while some of this is going to be up to the role of the distributor or the wholesaler to market your products correctly, just keep in mind where your products are going to be sold and try and be that problem solver and help answer those solutions right up front. So, Dziękuję, thank you very much for your time. Again, I appreciate the opportunity, and if there are any questions, I'll be happy to answer them now or after this conference. Thank you.
Szanowni Państwo, za chwilę
Ladies and gentlemen, in a few moments we'll have a short break, but I believe that this, because this presentation closes the American market part of our training. So if you have any questions about the American market and its specificity, so this is a proper moment to ask them to finish this part. Okay, we have one question. Thank you very much for all the presentations that were given. And I have the feeling that many of the information that was provided well, basically we know some of those things that were presented. We have some experience on the American market, but the product that we export mostly is raw meat. So here the question is on how should we act to build relations, and when introducing such a product or raw material on the market, how should we build proper marketing? We're not communicating with the consumer directly. Maybe here it should be mostly based on, maybe this is a question about the business relations, on building reliability for us as a producer and of raw material that is processed and later sold. Because this is mostly our export is raw product. But still, creating proper image of a product that is offered directly to the consumer is very important, and building proper story is something that we are strongly focused on, and all the comments and all the hints that were presented are extremely valuable for us, as they help our campaign to a large degree and will be useful in focusing more our future communications, slogans, and approach. But many of our producers function mainly as meat exporter. So our job ends with providing the importer or the processor with raw material. It's not offered on the market itself. We believe that they are used in creation of premium products, but we think that there is no information that they were created on basis of European or Polish meat. So, do you have any comments on exporting raw products, or so maybe some guidelines, hence, which would be very useful for us?
Well, if I understand correctly, as a exporter of raw products, your products are the building blocks of everything that's going to be sold in the United States. So if a company wants to advertise itself as antibiotic-free or hormone-free, that starts with you. So obviously, I would say if, and I don't know if your products are going to be just cut for raw products or put into further processed products, but I would say just create create the highest quality that you can at the start. Make sure that your customer in the United States are aware of that quality, are aware of the fact that tell them about the raising methods that you have for the animals. Tell them about the humane handling standards that you have. Even tell them about the slaughtering standards that you have, because sometimes consumers want to know about those things as well. And then if they're forward-thinking, they would use some of those attributes in the marketing of whatever the end product is going to be. But if they have an opportunity then to say, this is an antibiotic-free product, a hormone-free product, a natural product, even though that's a very loaded term, it starts with your products. The humane handling, again, that starts with your products. And if, like I said, if a company was smart, you could tout Polish pork as a gourmet luxury item. And I think that they should. Irish beef, nobody thought of that as a premium item until Ireland started telling them it was a premium item. And so you could do the same thing with that, I would think, to let them know how special pork is from Poland, rather than just something that they can get at a farm 3 miles away from their house. And make sure that people are aware of the premiumness, the premium qualities of that pork. And then, to a large degree, it is up to the processors in the United States to take it the rest of the way, but they should, and hopefully they would get to a good starting point and some good information from you.
Dziękuję serdecznie. Myślę, że
Okay, thank you very much. I believe that your help and support in presenting such stories was very useful and beneficial for us.
I have something to add to that. A lot of countries are doing joint marketing with the importers or the companies that are manufacturing, because there's another step. So once they manufacture another step and they use your product as a raw material, it doesn't always have to say on the label where it's coming from. It can say manufacturer distributed by. So a lot of times when you're making that negotiation with the contract, you say that we want to do a marketing campaign together. So you say that our product is part of this and Poland is supplying this. So Poland as a country would do a marketing as Turkey's done. Turkey's elevated a lot of its product because it goes out and it advertises Turkey as being marketing to the United States. And the other thing is also, as Sam said, to show that your food safety is up to par and that your whole process is good in the way you ship it, that it's sustained, that the cold chain hasn't been affected. That also helps. And mostly in the advertising with your partners, because partners who you're dealing with, you want them to show that they're not the only ones that are on the market, that you're part of that and that you take the responsibility because you know that your product is safe to be able to advertise and say, we are part of this. So that's very important.
Thank you so much. And Sophie, one more question for you, because you've mentioned a lot of formal information about about food safety. And there are also another issues in building relations with importer. You have to have partner in US to export.
Yeah.
And then maybe you mentioned also some cultural differences. So can you give also us some advice how to build these relations and how to find the right partner on US market to really make this business successful? Because maybe because of some differences, sometimes we have some problems to find the right people in US to really do good business. And after some tries and some problems with that, some companies may not want to continue because they think it's not so easy. And maybe it's not so easy because we don't know how to find good partner.
Well, that is a truth, that there's a misconception that it's much more difficult to navigate. But when you work with companies that understand the regulations and have experience, we find that even with customs, if something gets stopped, if you know what the requirements are and you have the contacts within FDA or customs, then you can get it released much faster. We've worked with companies on labels, as I was telling you before, where we did the due diligence with the companies where they made sure that their label was reviewed so that you have the supporting documentation. If FDA says, well, we don't like this, well, here, we did our due diligence. And then they'll be much more receptive to any issues. They'll say, okay, this time it wasn't good, but next time just change this and just fix this. And I think that the perception sometimes in the American market is that it's very difficult to work with certain countries in Eastern Europe because there's a standard that they are not open to being to change. And sometimes that's, not sometimes, but it's a very big misconception because Poland is very open to increasing its market share in the United States. So it's about the advertising, it's about being available, it's about the missions, it's about getting more advertising out there, or more working with the trade commissioners, and getting more companies and showing up at not just trade shows, but other situations like this, where we come here. So we take that back with us, and we go to our customers and say, look, we were in Poland, and Poland is something that you usually don't hear about in the United States, but bringing up the, what's the word I'm looking for? Just the concept of knowing that there are other countries out there. A lot of U.S. importers, they have a small scope. They want to be close. They think that if you import from Poland or Eastern Europe, it's very expensive. But it really isn't, because there are very convenient ways of shipping that give you an advantage. And sometimes the price of your product, even with the shipping, is less expensive because of the labor costs that you have here than a U.S. product. But it's a misconception. So it's all about really being out there and making yourself available and having more functions and inviting more industries and speaking at more organizations to get the word out there that, yes, we are open, we're available, we've got the process is already in place, we have a standard, and we are willing to work with you all the way, but we want you to work with us at the same time. And we understand the regulations, because our regulations are very similar. And when you have a government, especially, that wants to have that relationship and working on keeping the levels at the same, then you have an advantage over some countries. I'll give you an example. Argentina had a ban on lemons for many, many years, and they started to work with the U.S. government again. And now this is the third season that lemons from Argentina are allowed into the United States. It's about consistency. Things don't happen overnight when you're dealing with government regulations. And also, when they see that the regulations are easier, then the importers are more open to dealing with new markets. As long as they're not afraid that their name is going to be affected. So right now, it's all about recalls, traceability, and can we get what we need versus can you get what you need.
Okay. Thank you so much.
I could add one thing.
Yes, of
And again, I don't know, who your customers are in the United States, but I will say this: if a company is willing to spend the money to buy pork from Poland, put it on a container, ship it over to the United States, follow all the rules and regulations that Sophie has spelled out, and not use Poland in any of the marketing campaigns, then shame on them for blowing an easy opportunity to tell a great story. And I'm a writer, so great stories are what I live for. But still, this should be a wonderful opportunity. If you want to create a point of differentiation between your products and everything else on the marketplace, you've got a product from Poland. There are very few that are like that, and so that's a great opportunity. And so, maybe the companies that you're working with, they need some help in trying to figure out how to best tell this story. But I think it's a story that's worth to be told, and maybe that's where you step in, you processors step in, and kind of help give them your story, and maybe help push them towards that direction of making their pork product a premium pork product.
Thank you very much.
Jakieś dodatkowe pytania?
Any additional questions? Okay, if not, then let's have 10 minutes break. Let's meet at, say, 12:55, and then we will start the next part of our training, and we will focus on the Canadian market and its requirements, so also including consumer trends and export procedures. Thank you.
Witam Państwa ponownie po tej krótkiej przerwie.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome again after the break. I know I've interrupted some very interesting conversations, but still you'll have an opportunity to finish that conversations during the lunch or later on after our conference is finished. But we still have 2 presentations to go. And as I said before, we're going to concentrate on the Canadian market. And first, we'll begin with consumer trends in Canada, which will be quite a similar presentation to that referring to the US trends. And then we'll talk about expectations of direct consumers in Canada. And then we'll have the second part of the presentation about legal regulations, formal regulations. Now, Andrew Joseph, the floor is yours. Food in Canada, please tell us about the trends.
Thank you very much. Thank you for coming back. So, my name is Andrew Joseph. I am the editor of Food in Canada magazine. It's an 80-year-old magazine. I've only been there for 5 months. But I've been in the business with Canadian Packaging magazine, which deals with all aspects of the food processing industry as well, for about 13 years plus. So I'm not a newbie. I do have some experience. I just wanted to say thank you very much, first of all, to for inviting me to come here to Poland. It's my first time here, and so far I've had a great time. Everyone's so warm and friendly, and so I love it. Thank you. So let's see. I'm going to just tell you a little bit about myself, just because I've got to do 30 minutes. Maybe I don't have 30 minutes, so we're going to see. As I said, I was with Canadian Packaging magazine for 13 years. Past jobs for me, I used to organize trade shows for customers. I taught English in Japan for 3 years, junior high school English. I was a newspaper reporter for the Toronto Star newspaper. I taught piano and clarinet. And while I don't look it now, I used to play semi-pro soccer. I've got black belts in judo, kyudo, which is Japanese archery, kendo, and I was working on taekwondo until I blew my knee out a few years ago. And so I collect comic books, because why not, right? I also collect sports cards, aviation cards from 1919 and earlier. I write a daily blog on Japan, where I lived, called It's a Wonderful Rife. And I write a historical blog on aviation as well. Along with having coached women's and boys soccer, I currently coach hockey, ice hockey, and baseball. So I'm kind of all over the place with what I do. But even having said that, when I was growing up, the one thing I wanted to do was go into advertising. It was just one of those things. So that's kind of what we're going to talk about here. We're going to talk about consumer trends and food promotion and advertising in Canada, North America, but Canada, because Canadian market tends to follow a little bit what the US market does when it comes to marketing, even though that's not always the correct thing to do. For example, well, actually, let's see. Let me just start off. When it comes to meat products, you're not really going to get more people to say, oh, I want to eat meat now. Everybody who wants to eat meat is going to eat meat. All you can do, really, it's kind of a cannibalistic approach, is to try and get more consumers who are already eating fish or chicken to come over and eat more red meat. So how do you do that? Well, let's see if we can figure that out. The first thing to consider, though, is that when it comes to advertising in Europe, what works in Europe is not necessarily going to work in North America. In North America itself, what works in the United States isn't going to work in Canada, and definitely not going to work in Mexico. And even what's in Canada, it's not going to work from the West Coast to the East Coast because the people are just so different, and their buying habits, their consumer buying habits are completely different from one another. And what they like commercial-wise or advertising-wise is also different. So it's almost like you have your work cut out for you. If you want to hit the Canadian market, you have to kind of pick one part of the Canadian market. So I'm gonna take a look at this part here. Now it's like, let's see here. So in Canada, the province of Alberta is considered the beef capital of the country, just like Texas is in the United States. And I think, after Texas, they've got, I think it's Nebraska, then Kansas, California, Oklahoma, and then Missouri, I believe, are the top 5 beef cattle producing states. In Canada, it is Alberta, and then Saskatchewan, I think Manitoba and Ontario, and then it keeps going down. But it really is Alberta. So, it's like in the U.S., I know Sam has said that, they recently had like an all-time high with their beef production. Is that right? And it continues to go up. However, I believe it was in 2015, the beef production in the United States was 23.7 billion pounds, which is about 10.75 billion kilograms. And it seems like a lot, right? Except that year, that was the lowest beef production in the United States since 1993. So it does go up and down. But what happened? Why did it go down? And it's not like people forgot to buy and eat meat. But really, there were supposedly other various issues, from the so-called, maybe mad cow disease that may have hit, to consumers looking for less expensive options, which always seems like it's chicken. I don't know why, that's what it is. But then again, there's people for the last 15 years or so, they've been trying to create different eating habits as well. Like, going to fish or seafood options, as well as vegan or vegetarian. And both of those, like seafood and vegan options are gaining traction in Canada and in the United States, and they are taking a bit of a bite out of the beef consumption in Canada. I don't want to say the United States because I'm not sure, but I'm pretty sure it is happening in the U.S. So, look, when it comes to the world of advertising, there's that limited target market. You might convince a vegan to come over to the good side and eat a hamburger, but the odds of that are very slim, right? So what we are left with here in the red meat market is that cannibalistic approach. It's like, we're going to take some from the poultry market, we're going to take some from the lamb market, we want to bring them over. Well, that's what we're trying to do. So, let's see, all that the beef advertising promotions that we see essentially is just substitution of proteins. It's taken from one and to the other. But how do you get the customer to switch, to add more red meat to their diet? And there's a few different ways. One is the advertising medium, and the other is the product itself. But let's look at the product itself. I understand that you guys are now trying to bring in more frozen and refrigerated, maybe, red meats into our North American market. I know it's already coming. I mean, is it true that you already are bringing beef and veal into the North American market, or are you trying to bring more in right now?
We are trying to enter the market with...
So right now there's nothing?
No, just pork.
Just pork, okay. All right, good. One of the things is, like, if we want to get more Polish meat into our Canadian market and the US market, price point. It's got to be cheaper, because we can just buy it from our Alberta farms if we want, or we could buy it from the US if that's what we want as well. They're known commodities. It's a trusted thing that we've been doing for the last 150 years or more. So why do we need to buy from Poland? This is the trick. You guys have to figure this out. Why or how do we get them? You know, so you have to show why your product is either different or it's better. So is there something special about the Polish, cattle, the beef cattle, that we can exploit, that you can show to the markets in Canada and the United States? That's what we need to figure out. There's got to be something, but we'll get to that again. So yeah, lower price point though. I mean, we know the processors in Canada, they would love that. Maybe if the partners that you're working with are interested more in producing European-style meats than actually having a European-style beef product coming across is actually a way to go. You guys can hit this niche market first, perhaps. It's just selling to European-style deli processors or sausage makers saying, look, here's what we have. And in Canada especially, there are a lot of European-style deli processors. So if you're going to bring the meat across, this is a great market to hit. It really is, at least to start. I'm not saying that's all you should do, but at least it's a good entry point, I think. It's like, in Canada we have European style. You know what that means? It's not European, it's a European style. It's after the form of what they do in Europe. But if you actually have the beef come in, well, now you have more of a European product, which is what we want. In Canada especially, we're a pretty diverse people. If you say you're Canadian, what does that mean? Look at me. My parents are from India. I was born in England. I moved to Canada when I was 3 years old. I'm about as Canadian as it comes. And yet, what does that mean? Like, what's Canadian? So if you guys can figure this thing out now, European flavors. Brand owners love the European flavor. If we can, focus on that, and that's what you need to talk about with your partners once you develop them. And it's a possibility there are processing associations in North America who would be more than willing to talk to you. I'm sure we can figure out who they are and send that information along. In Canada, there's also the PAC, Packaging Consortium, or association. It's the Packaging Association of Canada before they went international. And they're always looking to partner up with people. And yes, it's a packaging group. However, they have meat processors, food processors galore who are part of their association. And they're more international than most other associations I've seen. They are probably a great source to ask for help. There's also the Independent Meat Processors Association. It's a small group, but it is a Canadian group, and they are always looking, for a new angle to push. How can we make ourselves better, more niche, worthy to grab a bigger slice of the pie? Well, if you have real European or real Polish, beef products, this is what will help them, and it'll help you as well. Okay, so now while the current consumer would like a less expensive and a flavorful quality meat product, current trends in Canada revolve around something called value added. But how do you add value? And to whom is this value added aimed at? For example, orange juices in Canada and the US, they already have a value added. You think it's just vitamin C, but no, they're value adding in flavors or vitamins such as calcium, which is like the domain of milk, and vitamin D. It's all into the juice, all in one package, right? And they're marketing it as an added health value for consumers. It's a way to get more of your daily vitamins requirements into your orange juice beverage rather than having to purchase vitamins themselves. Now, I know we've also talked about how when the meat industry, people really don't like it, when they're, when you're injecting your cows with hormones to make them grow or anything like that. However, what about vitamins? I mean, it's a health benefit. Is there a way of, I'm not sure, but is there a way of like marketing that aspect of it to people to get them, like, our cows are healthy, our cows have this, our cows have that. It's something more to think about, a way to promote your product. Let's see. Let's see here. Okay, so let's take a look at the, Canada as a target market for the Polish red meat products. As of 2017, Canada has a population of 36.71 million people. It's not a heck of a lot when we compare it to the United States, but it's about 0.48% of the world's population. It's not huge, considering we have such a big country, lots of space, but most of our population lives very close to the United States border, about 100 kilometers north of the border, and then hardly anything else above it. Well, what's so special about our population? Sophie said that in the United States, millennials have the purchasing power. I think that's pretty interesting. In Canada, we have what is now being called an aging population. We're not at the same levels of Japan, where they have a negative population. They have so many people who are 100 years of age and older. They have a negative population because of a lack of immigration, and just not so many people are starting families there. Now, while Canada's population is aging, it does present a wonderful opportunity, a marketing opportunity. So how can any product be shown to promote benefits to an aging population? In Canada, we consider a senior citizen to be someone who is age 65 or older. 65 is sort of the year that we're supposed to stop working, retire from work. Well, right now, about 14% of all Canadians are over the age of 65. And this will increase to 25%, a quarter of the population, in the year 2031. That's 9 million Canadians. What's 2031? That's the last year that the baby boomers, that's my generation, anyone born from just after the war, 1945-46, until 1965, they are considered the baby boomer. They are the ones who are going to have the purchasing power in Canada. This is the aging population that's going to hit the age of 65 by the year 2031. So you still have time to properly target this market. Okay, so all these numbers are from the Government of Canada, so I'm not just making it up. All right, so as of 2009, as of 2009, see, I can't read these glasses. The baby boomers right now, they are responsible for about 50% of all consumer spending in Canada, with 20% of that just being for food. And that's the highest spending bracket in Canada right now. So, like I said, this is our target market. This is what you're looking at. You're not looking at the millennials. We love the millennials. My kids won. But your spending target market in Canada, at least, is going to be the baby boomer. So not only is the Canadian population aging, though, it's also living longer. So that's through better healthcare, better medicines, better quality foods, and a tendency to try and live a healthier lifestyle. Maybe going to the gym, maybe not, maybe stopping smoking, all things I should probably do but haven't. 2016 figures of life expectancy show that the average Canadian has a lifespan of 82.3 years, which is ahead, apparently, of the United States, which only has a 78.69-year lifespan. I don't know what we're doing right, but, something's going on, so less stress. better health care. Of course, Canada has a highly diverse mix of peoples, as I said, from different cultures. And I think that also does play into the whole lifespan averages within Canada. We have a large population of Polish people, Ukrainian people, Russian, Chinese, Indian, England, Scotland, whatever. It's like, so, it's not just Canada is living longer. It's all the immigration that we have is helping that as well. But let's see here. On the west coast of British Columbia, the 2015 estimates for lifespan is 83.6, which is, I believe that's our high, while the territory of Nunavut, which is northern Canada, it's only 72.9 years of age. So that's, what is that? It's like, that's 3.5, what is that? It's 10, 11 years difference, isn't it? That's a big difference. I can't do math. Anyways, so we talked about senior citizens. So there are 3 types of senior citizens. There's the active and healthy senior who wants to maintain their youth and their vitality. There's those who live independently and try to manage their own health. And there are those who do assisted living. My wife is a nurse who helps with the elderly. I'm sure same type of jobs happen here. It's a big booming business, and in Canada, it's just becoming more and more needed. Most of the Canadian Canadian seniors right now, they live in private households on their own or with the family, with the rest in some sort of a healthcare facility. So again, this is the type of market that we have, and it's only going to get larger in Canada. So what can Polish meat exports do for the aging Canadian market? Well, there's currently a negative feeling about adding anything to the processed meat, once it's been processed. But when it's being raised, that's another matter. Again, it depends. We want to keep. We already know that the European meats are raised in a healthy manner. We know they're not being injected with steroids or anything like that. We know that, but it's still stuff that marketers in Canada and the United States exploit when they're showing off their new hamburger. Oh, look, it's GMO free, it's steroid free. Well, duh, it is everywhere. You can't just bring that stuff in and sell it in Canada. It's the way it is. So it's just ways of exploiting things. So if we make sure that everybody knows that this is steroid free, GMO, maybe it is GMO, genetically modified, yes. But maybe how it is. It depends. You're not Frankensteining it, creating a super cow. You're just giving it growth hormones to make it grow larger, faster, I believe, is what I heard yesterday. So there's ways of working around it, figuring out what you can say and what you cannot say to the Canadian market. Let's see. Well, we know consumers don't want to pay more. They like to think that they want something healthier. Canadians aren't going to pay for something just if it makes us healthy. But if you give us something that sounds like it's cheap, but we tell them it's healthy, we're going to buy it. Even if it's more expensive, you know what? If it's healthy, yeah, I want it. That's the way we are. We're a little bit different from the US, I think, in that regard, but maybe not. As an aside, here's an example. Canadians and Americans, we all say that we want greener, more sustainable products, such as our packaging. Well, but given the choice between purchasing something that's greener, that's a more sustainable product, but costs more, Canadians and Americans won't buy it. It's really weird. We say we want something that's healthy and good for the environment, but then we change our minds. And one of the best examples of this, there was a brand of chips, Harvest brand Sun Chips. And they introduced a new packaging material. Before, it's just like any packaging material for chips. It's a metallic foil. But it's very difficult, at least in Canada, for us to recycle it. Europe is different. I know different countries all over the place. UK is pretty good. but it was difficult to recycle. So what did they do? They brought in a new type of recyclable packaging for it. It looked just like the foil, but it was crinkly, and it made a noise. So when you put your hand in to eat a chip, it made this crinkly noise that was far louder, apparently, than what people really wanted. So they complained. And the chip manufacturer said, okay, and they got rid of this package. Didn't matter that it was recyclable. Somebody complained that it was too noisy. That's how stupid we can be sometimes in our market. So fair warning, okay? Now, let's see. So what do Canadian consumers want with regard to their red meat? The consumer doesn't really know. We really don't, except that we know that it should be safe, not too expensive, it should look and taste good. That's kind of like all we know. And kind of the rest of it, advertising takes over. And they tell us what we want to know, or what we think we want to know. We don't know, we really don't, until we see it. You know, like most advertising that we have, especially when it comes to meat and red meat, are fast food chains, or like McDonald's. They advertise, they hype that their beef burgers are non-GMO or hormone-free. The cows aren't given hormone injections, or that the cows are grass-fed. Things like that. We saw all that up there, right? As well in some of the meats in the U.S. It's not a big thing in Canada. It's not. See advertisement like that on brand packaging. It's not. It's just kind of generic the way we buy our meats. But focus groups have discovered that when it comes to our meat products, you can't go wrong with discussing family and tradition. I don't know what, Canada, it's a bunch of new immigrants, still. However, meat brand owners all like to talk about the quality of their meats, sure. The flavor, yes. The texture, but how it's based on an old-time family recipe, handed down through the generations, or maybe that product is an artisanal product, a bread, let's say, that's made by a craftsperson. So the quality is old-fashioned, and somehow, in our minds, the consumer thinks, oh, it's a higher quality. It's all part of the trick. Oh yeah, I like family. I should buy this old-time family product or this artisanal product. But what I haven't seen in meat advertising is something showing off the health benefits of meat. Nothing, except that you can tell me something is grass-fed. Okay, I don't know what that means. What the hell does that mean for me, the consumer? But it's there. It was there on that big piece of advertising that we saw on Sam's slide, grass-fed. Okay, well, what does that really mean? Who knows? You guys probably all know. The consumer doesn't. But we all think it's a big deal. It's like, oh, it's grass-fed. Must be important. Okay. So we don't know about the health benefits of eating meat. Like, can we expound on the fact that, yeah, it's got good iron, proteins, it's got fats, sugar, carbs, I don't know, omega-3, omega-6, the fatty acids. Is the meat lean? Is it fatty? Is this something that we can exploit? We know that red meat contains 8 essential amino acids, needed for growth and body maintenance. Is this something that you guys can push to promote to get more people to come over to the red meat side? Is this something? There's got to be ways that we can make people want to come over and switch from chicken, to come back over to the beef side. We know eating meat helps to build muscle tissue. Could help people recover faster after surgery. It's great for athletes. We know that beef contains CLA, which is conjugated linoleic acid, which has health benefits, such as weight loss. We know it contains vitamin B12, zinc, selenium, iron, niacin, vitamin B6, and phosphorus. Explain what it all is. Explain to us. Tell us how it's useful to our bodies. Part of the marketing campaign. Tell us, show us how we can use this. I know there's creatine. I know creatine is it was something that I used to take a creatine powder when I was working out when I was a lot skinnier, and then I got big. But I used to take this powder in a drink, and I know it's there, right there in red raw meat. And creatine is an important thing that perhaps we can use smartly. You don't want to say, oh, it's going to help you build body because maybe somebody doesn't want to have a bodybuilder body. But we'll have to figure it out. So there's more. There's health benefits from the consuming more red meat. Are there health benefits, from consuming more red meat for an aging population? You find out, and then you tell us, because the average consumer is waiting to be told. For the aging population, and I'm putting myself in that category, we want foods with value-added nutrition. We just don't know what it means. So we also want labels, when it comes to our packaging that are easy to read, and we want to know that all of the ingredients have a health benefit, or at least they won't harm us. And seniors, the senior citizens, they want good taste, they want freshness and quality, so same with everybody else. That hasn't changed, except that such factors are demanded now and are given by processors and further processors. So that's what you guys make sure, that's what is always there. But the Canadian senior market is growing, and the meat industry and the entire agri-food industry is looking for ways to provide products with health benefits. And that's the key, health benefits. With some seniors, the sense of taste and even the smell, it decreases with age. Others find it more difficult to chew and to swallow. I don't know if that affects you guys and how in your products, but it's just more information for you guys to at least consider. That senior citizens do have a decrease in certain sensory functions, but if you can market, like the beef tartare, it's easy to chew, health benefits, something to consider. So we've talked about the product, the consumer, and even some trends, but let's talk a little bit about advertising. In North America, there's a lot of ads for food, definitely, such as on TV, usually shown just before the 6 o'clock dinner hour or after 9 p.m. And the reason they put it on those times is to make people hungry. I assume it's the same here as it is everywhere else in the world. It's just smart business if you're going to buy an ad. They'll put fast food stuff on at late at night. It's 11 o'clock at night, there's an ad for McDonald's. Oh God, I want a McDonald's, and you head to the drive-thru and get a Big Mac. So there are, of course, many magazines, print and online, videos on the internet. They all discuss, the health benefits of some meat products, or in a full-blown article. And usually these are like opinion pieces written for the meat industry. They look and they read more like an advertorial rather than a real editorial. So maybe this is like something that we can consider. It's where people like myself come in, and Sam, it's like we can help promote the product, but you have to help us help you to promote it. We can write something real fluffy and say, oh yeah, meat is good. Polish meat's great, but why? We'll help, but help us as well. Now on television, as an ad, what I have not seen anywhere are the 30-second or 1-minute ads discussing why red meat consumption is good for you. The competition does it. And what we have here, if I could use your help, please. We have one here from the dairy farmers. It's from the Dairy Farmers of Canada. It's pretty good, and it's got people. Sure, it's pretty good, and it's got people talking because it's entertaining. Yes.
Tonight on Your Dinner, see what happens when Margot decides to add red pepper to the Western omelet. Past conflicts are back to haunt the kitchen crew. How will the onion respond? Will the ham forgive and forget? Meanwhile, green pepper and butter form a new alliance. Will common sense and good taste prevail? Don't miss your dinner. A true story starring eggs tonight.
Sounds good, doesn't it?
So that's from the Egg Council. That's from the Egg Farmers of Canada. And it was done to mimic an ad for an upcoming TV show. You know, so it's kind of fun that way. Now, now there's just not that many. There aren't that many beef commercials or even advertising showing beef, except Yep. Just one sec. So here we go. This is one of my favorites. This is the milk wrap by the Dairy Farmers of Ontario, and I hope it works, but it's fun.
Straight to your bones, from the farm to the fridge. We know what you want, cause we know how you live. We got the big bad Bessie with the M-I-L-K.
We be chillin'.
Want milk? I said more milk. Come on, want milk? I said more milk. Come on, straight to your bones, from the farm to the fridge. We know what you want, cause we know how you live. We got the big bad Bessie with the M-I-L-K. Want milk? I said more milk. Come on, want milk? I said more milk.
Isn't that great? It really is. It's like, before I was looking for this, I had only seen the 30-second version of it, so it stopped kind of right at the 30-second mark. But apparently there was that whole longer version. So what we have here, there's a couple of commercials, one which is used to show uses for beef. We were always wondering, like, how do you get people to eat more beef? Show them how to use it.
You can have a great beef dinner in no time at all. Well, almost no time at all. Beef. It's what's for dinner.
The pity is, that's from about 15 or 20 years ago. Nothing else has been done recently. But still, what we have here is another one. This is, I don't know what the heck this is, but let's play it anyways. I'm not going to play the whole 3 minutes. We're just going to play 30 seconds. Just pretend this is on your TV. There you go. That's all it does. They show how to cook it for 3 minutes and 7 seconds. Now, it's impossible for you guys, or for anybody really, to purchase an ad. You can pause. To buy an ad for 3 minutes of TV time. How much is that going to cost? That's a lot of money. But you could do that for 30 seconds, or you could do it in fast motion. With the video playing very fast at least. But hearing that, that's the best. You hear that sizzle. If you almost could smell it. So, this one here, this is one of the few beef TV advertisements. This is probably one of the most successful ones in Canada and the United States. It's for Wendy's, and I wish to God this thing was clear. But this is from, when was this? 1984. Apparently TV was a lot worse than I thought. But the first two are kind of blurry, but it doesn't really matter. What matters is this little old lady here, along with her two friends. But this is the one that you'll be watching. She's funny.
It is a big bun. It's a very big bun. Big fluffy bun. It's a very big fluffy bun.
Where's the beef? Some hamburger places give you a lot less beef on a lot of bun.
Where's the beef?
At Wendy's, we serve a hamburger we modestly call a single. And Wendy's single has more beef than the Whopper or Big Mac. At Wendy's, you get more beef and less bun.
Hey, where's the beef? I don't think there's anybody back there.
You want something better. Your Wendy's kind
Where's
of
the
people.
beef became one of the most famous catchphrases ever.
Manager. Where's the beef?
He's putting us under the supervisor.
If you ask me what you did, we should call the owner.
At Wendy's, the hamburger we modestly call a single has more beef than the Big Mac or Whopper.
We've got the owner.
Hello?
Where's the beef?
Wendy's kind of people never ask, where's the beef?
I don't think there's anybody there.
Now there's one more.
I really don't.
When you drive to Wendy's and order a single, you get more beef than the Whopper or the Big Mac. At Wendy's, you never have to ask, where's the beef?
There we go. There we go. Okay, so that loudmouth granny, that's actress Clara Peller. She did indeed become a TV icon because of her brassy bellow of "Where's the beef?" You wouldn't believe it, but you know, there were I was out there going, yelling, "Where's the beef?" I mean, it sounds stupid, but that was like one of the best marketing commercials of the 1980s, period, and maybe ever. It really is, because we still remember it now, right? Yeah. Yep. So let's continue there. No, just one sec. So processed meats such as deli meats or sausages are also advertised in television, but again, it's usually the larger companies that with the bigger advertising budgets that do stuff like that. Companies such as deli meats and hot dog sausage brand owners such as Schneider's, they have no problem talking about their old-time traditions and why their products are the best. Thanks.
It's tradition.
It's tradition. It's tradition.
It's tradition.
Our tradition. It's tradition. It's tradition.
So, a very ethnically diverse commercial there. What type of tradition are you talking about? It was birthdays. It was Polar Bear Day, which is kind of like on some stupidly cold day you go and jump into a frozen river or lake. It was all part of this wonderful thing that's tradition. So there's your marketing ploy again. Again, if you're looking for a partner, old-time tradition, well, European-style meats, family meats, talk about tradition. Advertising celebrating Canada, or Canadian roots, is it's usually very subdued. We're not like the United States. We don't really wave the flag around very much. But we are very proud of our roots. In fact, I wish we were a little bit more like the US in that regard. I wish we were proud to say that we're Canadian. We just don't say it enough, even if we are that way. We know that when you had, not just it, we know when we had here in Poland, we had a lot of proud people around, caused problems in World War II. They thought they were better than everybody else. That's not what the U.S. is like. They're not saying they're better. They're just proud to be Americans, and that's fine. And I'm, Canada, we are proud to be Canadians. We just don't necessarily say it as often or as loudly. But again, like I said, I think that's something that's good. So the Canadian trend is usually to show people enjoying the product outdoors in a family way. We saw that in that last commercial. Lots of outdoors. Carrying a canoe from one lake, a river to another, on their heads, out camping with the little boy at the end, from the jumping in the lake, whatever. There's just so many different things. More often than not, though, the concepts of family, the tradition of how the product is processed following the old recipes, its taste, its quality. This is how products such as sausages are advertised. And yet, despite it being one of the chief topics of concern for a brand owner, food safety is never ever talked about. And that's by design, of course. Because you don't want to say, oh, we've been mad cow free for 6 years. Nah, you can't talk about that. So you never ever want to talk about food safety. You never want to, even you guys could have like the safest processing, going on here in Poland, and even your companion partner that you have in the U.S. or Canada may also be the safest. You can't really hype it because you never know what's going to happen from one day to the next. Something could happen, and there goes your reputation. So you can't build an advertising platform on food safety as much as you'd like to. You just can't do it. No one ever comes out and says, our meat is the best because. Canada has a truth in advertising policy that it must follow, and I believe the U.S. does as well. But it's pretty tight. It's like you can't say you're the best. You might really believe it, and unless you can prove it, then you can't say it. So unless you can figure out a way of saying something with the Polish meats, there's something about the Polish meats that are better than the competition, or maybe some has an edge, or there's that flavor difference that that Ireland picked up on, that Sam was talking about, or the Japanese Wagyu beef, which is also in Australia. Like, what's so special that we can exploit? There's got to be a flavor, a process that happens, not just a price point. Price point's always good, but there we go. Here, beer advertising they used to show medals beer had won, and if one looked closely, just one sec. You can see on that previous one, that was Pabst Blue Ribbon. It showed that it won an award for being a great beer. Well, you know what? That's been on the advertising from before, since from the 19th century. So from the 1880s, I think it was, that was when it won its awards for being a Pabst Blue Ribbon beer. And yet that's what it had. That's what they're advertising still in 2018, that they are a blue ribbon beer. Well, yeah, you were 130 years ago, 140 years ago. Doesn't matter. You won it. If there's something that you can exploit that way in your advertising or marketing schemes, my Polish cattle has won an award. Exploit it somehow. If you can figure out a way to do it, let's use it. So let's see here. By the way, that Pabst Blue Ribbon. Nope. It won that award in the 1893 Columbian Exposition that was held in Chicago, when it was named America's Best. Or maybe it wasn't, because in 1893, there's no evidence that there actually was an award for that beer category or any beer category. It may have just been marketing, but people bought it, and it's still being used now. Fake news, fake advertising, there you go. By today's standards, that Pabst Blue Ribbon is a pretty ordinary beer. But in 1893, it was still an ordinary beer. And yet it worked. That was good advertising. So how do we advertise? The Canadian beef industry as an organization, it does not advertise much. Our Canadian beef organization does not advertise. Well, so like how many? Nope. No, she really wants to press that button. Oh, we're out of time? Okay, well, look. Well, look, tell you what then. Let's take a look at this video. It's on YouTube. It's a 90-second commercial, but we don't have to play it all. It was for the U.S. fast food restaurant Chick-fil-A. And yeah, it's a chicken restaurant, but there's one opening in Toronto in 2019. In fact, 15 of them. This is just online, I believe.
Cow has the eat more chicken sign up. Dude, are those two chickens? Oh, dude. Oh, dude. Oh, my God. Oh, that's unreal. Oh, there's more cows. There's more cows. Oh, my God. Oh, man, this is unreal. There's more chickens! There's more chickens! Oh.
Okay. So humor obviously strikes a chord with you, with the consumer as well. But especially for younger consumers, this type of stuff is online. My kid is on his tablet almost every waking hour when he's not at school. And he's looking at stupid videos on YouTube, placing an ad on YouTube, but making it funny, making it not seem like an ad. That's an ad. But making it seem like it's not an ad, that's what you want to do. You know what? I'm out of time, so let's just end it right here, okay? But if you have any questions, you're more than welcome to ask, and I'll talk more, as you can tell. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Jeżeli mają Państwo jakieś pytania.
If you have any questions, please, this is a good time to ask them. If there are no questions, we will go to Sophie's second presentation that will focus on the Canadian market. As we know what are the consumer trends, what are the expectations of consumers, we can go to export and the formal and legal rules of entering that market. So please, Sophie, the floor is yours.
Short people. Yeah, I think so. Can you hear me? Everything good? Okay. So even though we are in the same continent, we share a border, a land border. So in Europe, you can go from country to country. In the US, it's just two borders. So you go to Canada or you go to Mexico. But as Andrew was saying, the populace is very different, and what they focus on is very different. So, but the laws are very similar when it comes to imports. What we're going to do is just highlight the differences, because the food safety is the food safety, and most of the laws are very, very similar. They just have different differences in the government systems. So the phytosanitary certificate, the meat certificate, those are very specific to the countries. And they have what's called the Canadian Official Meat Inspection Certificate, where in Europe you have the veterinarian certificate, and the United States you have a meat certificate. They have different laws which cover basically the same things, but it's just something that you have to cite in your documentation, which is just different. And the Canadian customs and the customs requirements, there are certain differences, very, very minor, but we get back to the food safety, and it's the same, which is visibility, accountability, and ensuring that the hazards and the risk-based preventative controls are in place. So we go back to the same preventative controls and hazard analysis, and the record keeping is the same. And basically, if you go under the premise of the more you write down, the better it is for your company. You don't have to share everything you write. Some of it can be outside of the food safety program, which is specific to your facility or your industry or your product, that you don't have to share your recipes. There's a way of keeping certain information proprietary in both countries. And that's something that is very critical, especially when you have something that's very specific and very unique, that you don't want to share your recipe with just everybody. But you can say, as the ingredients get lower, you can say, and other ingredients. So the labeling is also a little bit different. And those are things that you have to, once you get to your specific product, is that you do a case by case. There's no real blanket procedure that you can say for everything that's like this. Then you have, each company has something that's unique. What is important that I didn't mention in the previous one, which is similar to Canada and to the United States, is allergen cross-contact. So allergens and nut allergies, and if you have a facility that has more than one product that you mix with something, that's very important to let the consumer know, because in the United States and in Canada especially, it is very important on the allergens, and that could be a situation that causes you not to be able to come into the United States, because sometimes when you make a meat product, you might add some dairy products, or you might add some cheese or something like that, or you might add some nuts to add like a nutty flavor to it. And if it's not on the label, it could cause some serious issues, more to the importer than to you, but also keep you out of the market. And the corrective actions. When you're talking about good manufacturing practices, current good manufacturing practices are extremely important, because there's a difference between manufacturing practices and current manufacturing practices. Are you up on the new regulations in your industry? And sometimes with Canada, they're even more strict than the United States as far as that's concerned. Like, how does it affect the consumer? Because, as Andrew was saying, in Canada, the marketing is more to the older consumer, the baby boomers. So their needs and their requirements are much different. So they're looking at different things that affect their health. Okay, same verifications as we talked about before. So it's very important to remember what type of product, what are the different regulations in any different market that you're dealing with, whether it's Canada or the United States, how specific you are to that country. And as Andrew showed us, which was very important, what's the different marketing to that population? It's very specific. Canada is a very different marketing. Their humor is also different than Americans. And you're dealing with a younger population that controls marketing versus an older population, which affects your food safety, because younger people can handle more health issues than older people can, or babies and things like that. Canada is very comparable to the United States, but it's very important to understand that they are different markets, that they have different regulations that are important. So you can't make a blanket statement. It's just like all of Latin America. All the countries are very different. So even though we have a border, a lot of times there'll be a restriction on importing something to Canada, because the United States is fearful that it'll come across the border in another way, in another form. So it might not be able to go into Canada because the United States says, well, we don't want it over there for that reason. So, and the same with the United States to Canada. It's, even though it's a border, there's still customs involved. There's still a border crossing involved. There's still the legalities of, as if you're going into another country. And that's very important to realize that is an issue. So you also have to make sure that if you're thinking about going to the United States after Canada, is that you have to have those regulations also, and vice versa if you're going to Canada after the United States. It's like going to two different countries. So you have to have the documentation and all of the support that goes to both of those countries, because there may be some differences and nuances that are specific to those countries. And like Andrew and Sam said, marketing to the region is extremely important, because some regions don't allow certain things in, and some regions do. For example, not to get back to the United States, but if you're shipping something even domestically from New York to Canada, to California, California stops certain products from coming into California, and the same as certain products can't go into Canada or can't come into the United States. So that's something very important to keep in the back of your mind. So Canada is really sometimes much more open than the United States, but when we get down to the bottom line, it's really the same about record keeping, about food safety, about traceability and accountability, and making sure that you know who your partners are, because it's very important, as we've been talking about, if your partner isn't mentioning your product, if they're not doing something to show or showcase that they have a Polish ingredient or a Polish product that's part of the final consumer edible, then there's a loss there for both parties. It's about how much we can show there's a partnership. And we're talking about global communities now, so we're also talking about partnerships in sustainability, but also in food production. So it's not just one country that is producing everything. How are we working together in a global environment? And that's also important, because people want to know that we're not isolationists. You know, not in Canada, not in the US, not in Poland. We're part of a bigger picture. So we want to showcase that, and that's very important. And I think in terms of when you negotiate with partners, that's something that we haven't been bringing up in the past, but now it's more important to bring that up when you're making partnerships and deals with companies, is to say, how can we market this together? How can we show that we have something that's good, that's added value, as they were saying, to your product? So there are things that we need to start to think about out of the box, not the normal way we've been doing business for the past, but now we're going into a new phase of how can we extend this in a more global way, so that we're all participating in the benefits of what we're producing and what we're sharing. So if there's any questions. I know I talk fast. I'm originally from New York, so I slowed down a lot.
So thank you for that. Czy ktoś z Państwa ma jakieś pytanie?
Do you have any questions? All right, so that would be all when it comes to the Canadian market, and that's the end of our day for today. And I still encourage you to ask questions to our wonderful guests. Maybe during lunch you'll come up with some questions, and I invite you to participate in other conferences about expansion to foreign markets. Thank you very much.